Sailing around the Great Sea in Wind Waker is one of the most magical parts of the entire series. To me, no Zelda game, not even Breath of the Wild, has captured quite the same feeling of wonder and adventure as that first playthrough of Wind Waker decades ago. And since then, Zelda fans have explored every inch of the game and uncovered every mystery and made theories galore, from the mysterious Fishmen to the ghost ship to why the aquatic Zora had to evolve into bird people after Hyrule flooded. You name it, there's probably a lore video about it. However, one of the most interesting facets of the Great Sea to me happens to be one of the least discussed topics about it. In fact, I have never, ever seen anyone else online bring it up, and it pertains to the very nature of the Great Sea itself, or perhaps a more apt term would be supernature, as the Great Sea is indeed supernatural, having been formed during a very biblical-style cataclysm through divine intervention. The result of this was the Great Sea, ethereal waters that formed an inhospitable habitat for natural organisms. So, what do I mean by that? Well, let me ask you a question. Throughout the entirety of your Wind Waker playthrough, do you ever remember coming across a fish market, or met an NPC at the docks with a fishing rod? Can you remember any of the many sailors in this game even mentioning fishing? There aren't any. Pretty odd for a game set on the ocean, right? Well, while sailing around the Great Sea, Link will encounter the Salvage Corps. This group recommends that we use our grappling hook to delve for sunken treasure, and also recounts to us the legend of the Golden Triumph Forks, an obvious distortion of the legend of the Triforce. However, what many people seem to gloss over is their line about the Great Sea being fishless. Odd that the game would so casually drop something like this and then choose not to elaborate further, probably why so many people miss it. And this isn't the only time that the Great Sea is referred to as fishless, as even Ganondorf himself reminds us of this fact at the end of the game in order to convince us that the gods did not save the people of Hyrule from him, but rather they doomed the people of Hyrule to an inhospitable world in spite of him. Well, this would certainly explain the lack of any and all fishmongers, but how true is this exactly? Well, obviously, there are in fact creatures in the Great Sea. We see them all the time. However, none of them are just normal animals. Jabun, the sea spirit, is, well, a spirit. We encounter plenty of sea monsters like Octoroks, but monsters are decidedly not natural life forms. They're creations of demons, or are creatures that have been corrupted by dark magic. Lastly, there are the mysterious fishmen, which are also clearly not normal fish. Even aside from their human faces and capacity for speech, they also seem to have a long-standing debt with the king of the long-gone Hyrule. So they too are not your garden variety fish, or ocean variety, whatever. Your ocean variety fish are nowhere to be found. When you sink under the waves to visit Hyrule for the first time, you get a good long look under the water's surface, and there's not a fish to be found for miles around. I suppose there are crabs, but we never actually observe them living in the ocean. They just walk along the shoreline and burrow under the sand. However, despite the fact that we never see anyone fishing, there are 3 references to fishing in the Wind Waker, so let's go over those now. The first being the Big Catch flag, which was designed to, quote, encourage a big haul of fish. And okay, that would seem to imply that fishing is a pastime here. But upon further scrutiny, the flag is said to have been designed by a fisherman from a foreign land, so possibly someone who lived somewhere else in the world outside the Great Sea. Because remember, the Great Sea, spelled with a capital G and S, meaning it's a proper noun, is not meant to refer to the entire world's ocean. It is, as the name suggests, only one sea that makes up a fraction of the total ocean, specifically the waters covering former Hyrule. And it would make sense that the seas formed from the waters of the ocean that predated the Great Sea would have fish. It is, after all, this sea that is stated to be fishless. So, I wouldn't necessarily use this flag as proof of a Great Sea fishing industry. The second reference to fishing comes from the pictographer Lenzo. In his upstairs studio, he displays many pictographs, one of them being of Link's home island, Outset. When asked, Lenzo will affectionately refer to Outset Island as the most delightful of fishing villages, which definitely would contradict the words of Ganondorf and the Salvage Corp. So let's investigate Outset Island a little. Well, it might surprise you to find out that there is actually very little evidence found on Outset Island to support the claim that it's a fishing village. We can find some boats, but no fishing rods or tackle. Let that sink in. There is not a single fishing rod anywhere on this entire island, and once again, no fishing markets. Not even a picture of a fish. On top of that, not a single soul here utters a word about fishing. Very odd for a supposed fishing village. Well, there is one character living here who is referred to elsewhere as a fisherman, but we'll get to him in a minute. As for the village in general, though, no. There's zero evidence supporting the claim that it's a fishing village. In fact, its primary source of protein seems to be pork. Even the soup that your grandmother makes for you is described as a pork and corn soup, not fish. To be fair, the pictograph Lenzo told us about was taken when he was still a young man, so perhaps some decades ago there were fish in the sea, but that they've since died off, leaving little evidence of Outset Island's fishing history. Or perhaps Lenzo was simply mistaken about the town in general, as, again, there is apparently one fisherman on the island, although he himself never mentions it. And that would be Orca, Link's teacher in the art of swordplay. According to his figurine biography, Orca hoped to be a swordsman himself, but had suffered a serious injury that ended his dream. Soon after, he returned to Outset Island and became a fisherman. So let's take a moment to investigate Orca's home. Again, there is not a single fishing rod anywhere here. He simply doesn't own one, or a tackle box or a fishing net. Very strange for someone who's a fisherman. But here's the interesting part. His walls are decorated in the gaping maws of long-dead sharks, and more importantly, harpoons. Yeah, see, I've always just assumed that these were spears, but no, upon closer examination, they are indeed harpoons. But surely a fisherman would need more than just harpoons to do his job, right? And what about the whole fishless sea thing? Because yes, sharks are fish. Well, here's my theory. Orca is indeed a fisherman, but not for food or for money, but rather for sport. You see, I strongly suspect that Orca is secretly a sea monster hunter. Think about it. He used to dream about being a great swordsman, but due to his injury, he had to give up on that dream. What if he's filling that hole for danger and excitement with a new hobby, hunting sea monsters? It makes sense. We know he has experience fighting monsters, as he owns a Knight's Crest, a treasure worn by Darknuts. And what if the jaws on his walls aren't actually from sharks at all, but rather Gjorgs, those shark-like monsters encountered all around the Great Sea? And thanks to Phantom Hourglass, we know that Gjorgs can grow to absolutely massive sizes, which would explain why Orca's wall is decorated in so many various jaw sizes. That's my theory anyway. Let me know what you think about that in the comments. But if I'm right about that, then Orca's fishing career would still align with what Ganondorf and the Salvagers state. But of course, this all begs the question of why? Why are there no fish in the Great Sea? Well, believe it or not, there actually is an official explanation for this, and it comes from the Legend of Zelda Encyclopedia, which is probably why nobody knows about it. Here's what it has to say. The Great Sea in The Wind Waker is an illusory ocean created by a torrential downpour from the heavens. Its ethereal water is unlike the water natural to Hyrule, and so only monsters and fishmen are able to live there. Interestingly, this bit of trivia is mentioned multiple times in this book, and is also the reason given for why the so-called Sea Zora were forced to evolve. They literally just could not survive in the Great Sea's ethereal waters. So yeah, there you have it. There's no fish in the Great Sea, it's an inhospitable habitat, that's why the Zora evolved, and Orca is a secret sea monster hunter. Canon. Well, okay, that last one isn't necessarily canon, but like, you know, The guy's not fishing for fish. That much is certain.